Morning and welcome. The 12th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Infrastructure is hereby reconvened. We'd like to welcome our public audience as well as our in-house audience to the meeting's resumption. I would like to remind everyone to please turn off your cell phones or at least place them on silent. This hearing is of course being broadcast live on the Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. We'd like to welcome members of the viewing public, and of course, please feel free to send comments via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament, or on Twitter at ttparliament. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome the officials of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Caroni Green Limited, and Namdevco. And I would like to ask you to now introduce yourselves in that order: Ministry of Agriculture, Caroni Green, and Namdevco.
Good morning, Chairman and members. I am Angela Sue, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture.
Good morning. I am Patricia Laborde Grant. I'm a Technical Advisor, also Coordinator, Policy and Planning for the Ministry.
Morning, my name is Patricia Maraj and I'm the Acting Chief Technical Officer in the Ministry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Neela Maraj. I'm Acting Director, Agricultural Planning Division, Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries.
Morning, everyone. I'm Sharma Lala, CEO of Caroni Green Limited.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Savitri Ramgulam, Accountant of Caroni Green Limited.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dinesh Gulcharan, Farm Operations Coordinator, Caroni Green Limited.
Hi, morning, everyone. I'm Bibi Ali, Technical Advisor with respect to agribusiness, process management, and workforce development in the agricultural sector.
Dennis Ramdeen, Chairman, Namdevco. Morning.
Hi, morning. Wayne Innes, Deputy Chairman, Namdevco.
Good morning, all. I'm Juliana Davis. I'm a board member for Namdevco.
Hi, good morning, all. My name is Ayub Mohammed, Acting CEO, Namdevco.
Okay. And of course, I'm Stephen Crease, Senator Stephen Crease, Chairman of the Joint Select Committee, Land and Physical Infrastructure. And on my right is...
Good morning, Rushton Parry. I'm the Vice Chairman of the committee.
Morning, Nigel De Freitas, member.
Glenda Jennings-Smith, member.
Thank you all very much. Just by way of reminder, the objectives of this inquiry are firstly to assess the type and output of agricultural commodities being produced in Trinidad and Tobago, to examine the program and initiatives geared to encourage agricultural participation, to gain an understanding of the policies, plans, and research being employed to expand the types and quantity of agricultural commodities produced locally, and to identify the challenges faced by the Ministry of Lands and Fisheries, Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, and the major stakeholders in the agricultural sector in attempting to increase crop diversity. I would like to acknowledge receipt of the written submissions from the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, dated February 13th, from Caroni Green Limited, dated February 9th, and Namdevco, dated February 8th, in response to the lead questions which we had sent for written responses. I would now like to invite the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, to make some opening remarks.
Good morning again, Chairman and members, as well as the other agencies. It is a pleasure to be here to provide information to this committee that will assist in its mandate. The agriculture sector represents a critical component of any country in its impact on national development. It is with this in mind that we have developed a draft National Food and Nutrition Security and Agricultural Development Policy and Action Plan as one of our strategies for development of the sector. We are about to enter our second phase, where we will, among other activities, engage stakeholders for consultations to assist in the development of the final plan. The policy plan envisions a rapid transformation of the rural and agricultural sectors and its renewal as a vibrant and productive economic sector with the aim of contributing to the diversification of the national economy. The sector is envisaged to evolve as an important driving force in expanding livelihoods for rural people, enhancing employment and income opportunities, and improving food security and the nutritional status of the entire population. The ministry's role, therefore, is to provide the enabling environment, including the policy direction, the legislative and regulatory framework, and supporting programs. The plan is to grasp the opportunities using the sector's strength while reducing threats and challenges. As such, our PSIP programs are focused on infrastructure development, research and development, provision of planting material, quality breeding stock, training programs for farmers, as well as trainers, and the sustainable management of the fisheries and forestry resources. This, we believe, will contribute to the comprehensive development of the sector as well as the economy as a whole. With this, we welcome your questions, which we know will assist you in your deliberations, and thank you for having us.
Morning, Chairman. Caroni Green Limited, just for the benefit of the attendees, would be a relatively new state enterprise. It was only incorporated in December 2013 and actually began operations in 2014. In a very short space of time, we are trying to fulfill our mandate, which is to bring idle or underutilized lands into active production. But I think in looking at the development strategy for the company, we necessarily have to look at, I think it's very important that we understand where we are before we determine where we are going. And I've looked at some data that's been published by the FAO that deals with our position as a country with respect to agricultural development, and I think that should inform the direction as we move forward. When you look at some very key statistics, the average real contribution of agriculture to GDP among CARICOM countries, Trinidad and Tobago is the lowest among all CARICOM countries. We are less than 0.8%, whereas you have Jamaica about 7%, Guyana about 26%, and we've also researched the Canadian model, and they're about 7% of GDP. Another very important statistic is what has happened to the sector over the period 1990 coming forward. And again, we are rated as the worst performing country among CARICOM in that we have had the highest reduction in contribution of agriculture to GDP. Our percentage from the time the measurement started to now, we've decreased by about 76.5%. And a significant portion of that is attributable to the decline of the sugar industry. By comparison, again, if we look at Jamaica, Jamaica's decline over the same period has been a mere 2.5%. What that tells us is that we really have a very long way to go in terms of trying to capture some kind of comparative status among even our CARICOM members, and more so, the job is even more Herculean when you look at some of the more developed countries. When you try to understand the rationale about where we are again, and this is, I want to just premise my contribution, Chairman, that we are making this contribution really with the benefit of being able to make a meaningful contribution to development of the sector. And I think it's important that we face what the reality is, and that's why I'm sharing these statistics. The other very significant observation that I've made is that when you look at some of the countries where agriculture is making a bigger contribution, Canada, Jamaica, Guyana, we've looked at those. And on every one of those websites, you can go and see a strategic plan. In the case of Canada, they've got one 2013 to 2018. And what is instructive is that they are meeting already to take it beyond 2018. When you look at Guyana, Guyana has one 2013 to 2020, and it deals with all of the technological advancements and so on that are required. And the story is the same in Jamaica. Jamaica is very, very well developed. In fact, they've got a Vision 2030 document. Unfortunately, in our case, we are still dealing with the documents that with an action plan that's dated 2012 to 2015. So it says that we are really not keeping pace with even what is happening among member countries within our own region. And having recognized that that is where we are, we can then look at what is required to achieve the mandate for the development of the sector. And when you look at there are some common themes that exist among the strategic direction that all of these countries are doing. And they're looking at building a competitive, profitable, innovative, environmentally sustainable sector. They're putting a lot of focus on non-traditional commodity value chains. They are building capacity among the producer organizations. Very, very importantly, they're fostering partnerships and strategic alliances. And again, they are establishing the institutional frameworks for agribusiness and enterprise development. In many respects, when you scan our local sector, many of these ingredients are missing. And it's important that we recognize that and we take the appropriate corrective action. We at Caroni Green, we've started off, and in analyzing our mandate, we have tried with very, very limited resources to make a contribution to the sector. I think it's important to note that we have not received any kind of government support since 2014. So that 2015-16 fiscal year has gone by, 2016-17 has gone by, and we have not received any financial support. But despite those major constraints, I am very proud of the company's achievements, some of which are, for example, that in October of 2016, we crossed the landmark of production of hot peppers of 500,000 pounds, which is a first in Trinidad and Tobago. We are now over 700,000 pounds, and we expect that before June of this year, we would cross the landmark of 1 million pounds. And the pepper was selected on the basis of scanning the needs of the country, and those needs clearly identified that our country is facing a very significant foreign exchange crunch. So we looked for that commodity that could generate foreign exchange as well as import substitution and conserve foreign exchange. And I think we've done a reasonably good job of that. I am also very proud to say that in October of last year, we also participated in the Trade and Investment Convention that is run by the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association. And as a small entity, we came out a winner among the small business category at that convention, which was dominated by the private sector. And it also gives me great pleasure to inform this committee that despite all of these very tight challenges, I am proud to say that for the first time in this fiscal year that ended September 30th, 2016, the company would have generated a profit, and we expect to continue along those lines. Our major request is that we could make a much more significant contribution to the development of the sector, but I think clearly the authorities need to see that infrastructure development, investment in systems such as irrigation and so on are way beyond the capability of our resources. And if as a country we make a determination that we want to see the sector grow, I think that we have to make an appeal for some kind of further support to make it happen. I think our results to date demonstrate that we can do it, and we are committed at Caroni Green Limited to continue to make that contribution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I hear from Mr. Ayub Mohammed, CEO at Namdevco?
Good morning. Good morning again. Our National Agricultural Market and Development Corporation, we were established by an Act of Parliament in 1991 to provide an enabling environment for the sector. We have a couple of platforms that we use to do that. We have a wholesale market facilities, both for fresh produce as well as fish. We have a service component where we provide some marketing intelligence information, as well as we operate an e-platform, NAMIS, which gives us price and volume data that is shared with the rest of the country. And we have a new initiative out of the ministry that is called Farm to Table. The Farm to Table initiative, we have couched the Farm to Table initiative on using some of the modern trends in the industry, good agricultural practices, to develop some of the other platforms, including school feeding, the health authorities, Northwest, Southwest, the third platform would be working with the security services, as well as working with the exporters to see how best, so the different prongs are going to target different end of the markets, one for export, and 3 of them institutional, as well as provide farmers with a direct opportunity to sell their produce outside of the wholesale market situation by operating our farmers market. Currently, we have 9 farmers market that is expanding in terms of, we have gone from awareness to having more of our farmers choosing that direct opportunity to use those markets to sell their produce. Some of our constraints at this point would be we would like to expand some of our markets. We would like to modernize some of our markets to make them more compliant with some of the modern trends. And 2 of those trends would be food quality and food safety. So you would see on the Ministry of Health would be they had a constant program of encouraging fish, for example, to be iced. We want to make sure that our facilities are in sync with the rest of the national programs that allow us to build a platform for agriculture, both by being an enabler in terms of our marketing intelligence, as well as our physical facilities and our export platform to represent modern agriculture. I think we are positioned to do that despite the challenges. And if we are given, as we continue to develop our mandate and continue to see agriculture at the next level, we are in a position with a few additional resources to be able to make that happen. We also, I think at this point, we have already started to look at establishing links, direct link with all of the other players. So we have an invitation with Southwest Regional Health Authority to speak to them on getting our farmers to provide their suppliers with produce, because they are dealing with patients, immunocompromised persons, and Namdevco, through expanding our farm certification program, we can make a greater contribution in ensuring that our hospitals, for example, have fresh produce which meets the requirement for that particular end of the market. We also hoping to do the same with school feeding. We were supposed to meet on yesterday with the CEO of school feeding, but she had to attend an emergency, and I'm sure that meeting is going to happen sometime soon. So those are the kinds of linkages that I think Namdevco, together with other sectors in the industry, can use to modernize our agricultural sector. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. We will begin our formal questioning now. What will normally obtain is that the questions will be directed through me to the Ministry of Agricultural Land and Fisheries, and then the subsidiary agencies will be afforded an opportunity to amplify on whatever information is supplied by the ministry. Okay, so unless, of course, a question is directed specifically to an agency. All right, so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Madam PS. The Ministry of Agriculture, in my view, as a policy driver, policy director, in terms of our agricultural platform in Trinidad and Tobago, what is the relationship between the Ministry of Agriculture, Namdevco, and Caroni Green at this time?
With regard to Namdevco, we have a relationship where we encourage the farmers market, right? As a matter of fact, we have had the location of the farmers market at our new offices in Shogunas, right? As well as weekend gone, we had it at the head office where we are at now. Basically, we are trying to, with them, to assist farmers in being able to sell their produce. Namdevco has a certain amount of farmers, and ministry is responsible for farmers in general in Trinidad and Tobago. Namdevco has particular farmers. So it's really to encourage them so that farmers would be able to have their produce sold. Also, through a PSIP project, we are supposed to engage in good agricultural practices program, which they would be training farmers in the production of the commodities.
And is it the same for Caroni Green?
With regard to Caroni Green, we are reviewing what Caroni Green is doing. Caroni Green, in its business plan, had indicated that they had increased food production, decrease in the national food bill, reduced food price inflation, et cetera. But what we've noted is that with regard to Caroni Green, the focus really is on the export of hot peppers only. And so we have to look at it, look at this entity to see whether we could look at other produce and so on. That, of course, will be a policy decision. Caroni Green, as far as I'm aware, was provided with funding, I believe, in the first year of its operations. And the idea was for them to become self-sufficient after that, maintaining their own business and so on. So because of that, we have to look at it now, in different eyes if you want to look at the diversification.
Just a follow-up to that. In terms of the policies for both Namdevco and Caroni Green, does the ministry decide the policy of those two agencies, or do they operate their own policies in terms of moving forward? Because I'm trying to understand if there is a synergy between the driver, the ministry being the driver of the sector, and you have two important agencies, Namdevco being the marketing arm and so on, marketing, packaging, and so on, and Caroni Green being an arm of, if you call it agricultural engineering. Is there a synchronization of policies among the three agencies, those two agencies and the ministry, or do they operate independently outside of the directive of the Ministry of Agriculture?
There is some synergy with regard to the agencies in that we generally have the same goal, and it's looking after one of our stakeholders, our main stakeholders, which are the farmers, right? So, with regard to that, when we are preparing our projects and so on, we keep that in mind with regard to that. With regard to Caroni Green, though, as I said, we are in the process of evaluating what they do, right? And we are looking for a way forward with regard to that.
I am directing my question to Madam Permanent Secretary. You stated quite clearly earlier in your presentation your ministry's agenda and objectives. And it's all about creating an environment to encourage agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. I want to direct my question to the recent disaster faced by many farmers, especially on the Northeast Coast, and ask you to describe for me the procedure for accessing this program. And I also want you to describe the qualifying mechanism for this program.
We have a disaster management assistance program, and what we do where we have found that there has been the persons have been affected, farmers, fisherfolk, whatever it is, by some natural disaster. We go to them, and of course we have to take the information from them as to what impact the disaster would have had on them, right? That is to be quantified, right? That information is quantified, how much they would have lost and so on. And on the basis of that, we come up with a mathematical figure with regard to how they would be compensated.
That doesn't answer my question. Can you give some more details as to what a farmer can expect when they face a disaster? And I'm speaking specifically to our recent disaster. And there was disaster as far back as 2015, to which farmers have not been given a response. Can you give me some specifics related to that? Because at this point in time, they are accustomed to people visiting and taking information, but nothing after. Can you tell me what really happens after?
Well, I don't know that we could say that, because everything is a process, right? And once it involves funding, we have to be careful how we go about the process to ensure equity, right? To ensure that people are not favored and all of that. And the gathering of the information is an important process in that regard. The information comes back to us. We have to assess that information, right? We have to determine whether in some cases, whether what they're saying happened really happened based on the disaster. Because as you would imagine, there may be, people trying to do, try something, right? So when that information comes to us, we have to really look at it with a fine-tooth comb, right? And based on the assessment and the funding that we have, we come up with a formula for the payment.
Madam BS, can you give us an approximate time that this process can take? 1 year, 2 years?
I would say between three months and 6 months.
This question is for, good morning again, this question is for the ministry. In your submission, you identified the challenges facing food producers in achieving greater diversity in agriculture. One challenge identified was consumer acceptance and market assurance. Has the ministry engaged in stakeholder consultation, for instance, with supermarkets to improve this area? And what other actions has the ministry undertaken to improve consumer acceptance and market assurance? The first question is, has the ministry engaged in stakeholder consultation, for instance, with supermarkets to improve this area? That would be consumer acceptance and market assurance. That's the first question.
Let me ask my Director, Agricultural Planning.
Good morning again. And your answer would be yes. Last year, the ministry would have met with the supermarket associations. We also partnered with the Massey Group for our Walk for Food last year. And we did get the assurance that they would be willing to take on local production to display some of the products that they are importing. And I know that Massey is doing a consultancy right now with respect to seeing how they themselves could get into the production of some local vegetables to this place. So yes is the answer to your question.
And based on the consultations you've had or you've seen, are you seeing any benefits coming out of it thus far?
Well, the thing is with agricultural production, it takes time for when you have to plant. Some farmers had indicated an interest in partnering with the supermarkets, and they have started doing so already. Specifically for some of the vegetables, the tomatoes, the lettuces. So some work has started among the farming group.
And do you expect to see an increase in production based on this linkage? Because one of the things that happens, especially when you link with supermarkets or these entities, if the producers have a high quality, they tend to increase the demand based on the other end of the chain, which is the consumers are asking for more of that product. So are you starting to see any increase in production so far?
Yes, we have, and the supermarkets have indicated that they are seeing a willingness of the consumers to purchase the local produce because they tend to be more certain what they're getting from the local producers rather than the imported products.
And the second question was, what other actions are being taken, I guess, outside of the stakeholder consultations to increase or improve consumer acceptance and market assurance? Is there any other actions being taken?
The ministry had embarked on a buy local campaign, and we continue encouraging the consumers, especially for food safety and for health, to buy local produce.
About assistance in regards to exporting, which would also help to increase production locally, regionally, let's say, or internationally. Is there any assistance or training or anything of that sort to sort of open up the market for local farmers?
Well, I know Namdevco is the arm of the ministry that assists the farmers in terms of their export to the region. So perhaps Namdevco could explain what they have been doing with the farmers.
Well, maybe Namdevco could elaborate. Is there what other initiatives have been taken in that respect?
What?
That's the export.
The export currently out of Trinidad is down. If you look at some of the data I presented, there are two commodities that we were primarily exporting into the North American market, pumpkin and hot peppers. Those are down for some specific reasons. In terms of the regional export, we still have some regional exports. Some of it goes out of our packing house at Piaco. Some of it are done by independent pack houses. Some of that data we have not been able to capture. I've been here for the last at Namdevco for the last 7 months. In terms of the international markets, we are going to find ourselves in a situation, we have found ourselves in a situation where those markets are now, especially the US market, they now have a rule called the FSMA, the Final Rule on Produce Safety, under the Food Safety Modernization Act. And they are now making good agricultural practices. It's no longer a voluntary requirement, but it's fast becoming a standard. Our farms, at this point, we have some farm certification, which is really the Barbados protocol. When we got mealybog, we had a protocol in place that allowed us to export into Barbados. So there were certain pesticides and those things that we could not have used. In terms of those foreign markets, in order to capture that end of the market, that the good agricultural practices will almost become mandatory for us. In terms of what we are doing, we are currently we are looking at our strategic plan to put GAP at the front of the Farm to Table initiative, as I have mentioned before. We are going to face some resistance because it is going to be asking for some new practices for some farmers. Some are going to be able to still get into that market. Some clearly will need some additional work in terms of training. On the training end, we have started a training, at least in this month, we have started to train our field officers who work with us as part of our farm certification program to bring them up to scratch. So we've done some training on irrigation, we've done some training on a plant doctor training, so they will understand that it is not business as usual. You can't apply some of the pesticides that we're accustomed. If you go back into the Hansard when they were established in Namdevco in 1991, there was that issue about references made to cabbages almost looking blue. The perception that it was being sprayed with too much pesticides. So that it has to be something strategic. I came from the Ministry of Agriculture, and I was the one who was in charge of the Good Agricultural Practice Program. We are going to need more people who are trained in that area to be able to capture that end of the market. Because it's not simply a matter of taking produce, put it in a box, get it on an aircraft, and get it in a foreign market.
I like what you're saying in the sense of good agricultural practices. One of the things that I know in certain industries is that there are bodies internationally that certify farms based on good practices in that particular industry. Are you all looking at any kind of body to be set up in Trinidad and Tobago that can certify these farms that may be equal to international bodies, or if we don't want to reinvent the wheel in that aspect, have some sort of a linkage where these bodies can come down and certify the farm. So you'll still do the training, but you at least have a benchmark by which these farms can achieve and actually have a document that says that they're certified, which might make it easier for them to export at that point in time. Are you looking at certification at all?
We have looked at, or in fact, in 2012, 2013, year about, there was a national initiative to bring to the table all of the players to develop a national good agricultural practices standard. We are now revisiting that particular initiative. In terms of our end, our facility at the packing house, we are still the only certified FDA facility in terms of that end of the bargain. We are trying to get the packing house more and more compliant with HACCP standards, and in terms of feeding. So you have a packing house that is FDA approved, that is trying to get more into the HACCP end of it. But on the other end, on the GAP end, there is some work. The honest truth is there is some work still to be done in terms of becoming either certified against Global GAP or Suri GAP. Or the model that we were looking at actually was quote-unquote Trini GAP, benchmark against Kenyan GAP, which sort of mimic what we do in that you're using practices or you're encouraging practices that are easy for our farmers in our particular circumstance to be able to follow. So that the model would have said, we, Namdevco, would be monitoring the standard. So we would be, in a sense, second-party audit. You train the farmers so they can be first-party audit, himself to himself. Namdevco, through our farm certification, would be the second-party audit. And an external agency will do the third-party audit.
Very good. What do you expect the acceptance of that training would be? Because one of the most difficult things is that as farmers, they have a particular practice that they've been using for years, and you're now coming to say, well, you have to sort of change that in order to export products and make more money. But sometimes the acceptance of that is not great. What do you expect the acceptance of that training and certification to be with farmers in Trinidad and Tobago?
If I may just back up a bit, in 2005, we had introduced farmers to the concept of GAP. We had done some training to Tobago out of AICA. There was far more resistance from our farmers than we had in Tobago. Just before I left the ministry, I was teaching some courses, and I have made mention of GAP. And from that feedback, it would appear there is a greater amount of interest now in adopting, or at least becoming more aware of good agricultural practices. I think as a country, we are becoming, even from our own health perspective, even in terms of our own health, we are making a bigger link between something that says Namdevco certified good agricultural practices and consumer acceptance. And if there is that pull, if there is a market pull in terms of what consumers are now looking for, or if you can build awareness from that end, then I think it would be easier. Yeah, I've not tested it. I don't have any empirical data at this point to support what I'm saying. But from my observation, from where I see the market is going. And I also believe that if we adopt that approach, then GAP becomes a competitive advantage to farmers because there is a market readily available for them. If I just make one other intervention, there was an initiative at Piaco Packing House. At that time, there was a view that Packing House should encourage some amount of business activity to change the way produce would be marketed. And we took on a cucumber project to supply to a particular group of sandwich outlets, the 34 of them in all. And we, at the end of the first year, by changing that model, by adopting a different production practices, adopting a system where we assisted the farmers, so we supplied you with the crate, we washed and sanitized the crate, we brought it to our packing house, put it through a chlorination treatment to ensure that the product had a particular level of safety and a particular quality. In 1 year, we were able to get that entire market. So that I think even domestically, apart from the export, if you're able to build that kind of awareness in terms of how we eat what we do, the way we eat our foods. At the end of that first year, that the company was so pleased, they said, look, we are willing to stop taking foreign tomato. If you can get farmers to do what you have done with the cucumbers, if you as Namdevco can get them to grow it with this particular set of practices, if you can operate the ripening rooms for us, then we'll be more than happy to take local produce rather than use the foreign one. And if you look at the foreign import, the food import bill, I would have given you some data. It's about $9 million average that we would have imported in tomato alone over on a 1 year basis. So the opportunities are there. There's some work to be done. But I think Namdevco has taken the right set of steps to get the good agricultural practices in place. And I think it can have a beautiful spin-off effect if we, as I made in my opening remarks, if we modernize our markets, our fish markets. It will not be called good agricultural practices. Those would be HACCP compliant facilities. So you're building a future industry based on food safety and food quality.
Thank you.
I have two questions, one to Madam PS. In light of what Mr. Mohammed spoke there concerning GAP, what is the ministry doing in terms of ensuring that our farmers adopt that GAP system and so on? Is there a policy that you are driving into our agricultural sector that farmers adopt that type of policy? Is there anything along that line?
Generally, we have in our training element in the ministry, we have our extension officers and so on who assist farmers with regard to the good agricultural practices. We have them in the different districts. It is managed by the regional administration north and regional administration south, so that we go out to people as well as people come in to us with regard to that training.
Is the ministry doing anything with regards to the adoption of grades and standards of these produce for our farmers? Is there a policy around grades and standards?
All right. What is happening is that AICA is assisting us with training a cadre of persons who would be able to certify the products. Those persons to be trained would be within our research and development division, so that we would have a body of people who can actually certify, to the quality of the product and so on.
So that's something that will be coming on stream?
It will be coming on stream.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the AICA is having a close-out program in which they are going to identify the different things that they are going to do for the different countries that will be attending. And for us, it would be that certification.
Okay. So our grades and standards, our GAP, these things are moving along well with our farmers. Mr. Mohammed, through Namdevco, you spoke about the packaging houses. What is the current status with the two packaging houses, the one in Tabaquite and the one at Bridgeton Castle? Are they operational at this time?
No, they're not operational at this time. The plan is to get into public-private partnerships with those facilities. We would have had some interest on the part of some of our entrepreneurs who are involved in the agricultural sector to utilize those facilities. And that is where we are at this point. We are in discussion with the Ministry of Finance. We have met with them. They would have asked us for some additional details on some of these, on some of the technical and financial feasibilities, but that's the plan with those facilities.
Would you agree then that those facilities, and I note in the 2016-2017 budget, they spoke about an additional 4 of these packaging houses being built. But would you agree that those houses are absolutely critical to our export push in terms of our diversification over the next couple of years? And should there be a greater push towards getting these things operational? Because, I've from 2015, the conversation has been getting these packing houses going. And we're in 2017, and, nothing has happened with those two. And as far as I understood, those two facilities I think they're outfitted and they're ready to go. I also note in your presentation also, there was an issue around the ability for cold storage in terms of being able to hold on to farmers' produce during the packaging process to get it going. Wouldn't these facilities assist in getting the cold storage requirement that the farmers need?
Well, those facilities at this point, they were open, but they were not outfitted. So they're not at this point operational. In fact, there's still there's a fair amount of work to be done in both Brickfield and Bridgeton Castle. If I had to give you a strategic way forward in terms of the export, it would be, when I made reference to the cold chain, I meant from farm to where we currently export from, because that facility at Piaco was strategically located to air freight produce closer to Piaco. The moment you start, let's say you decide that you're going with Brickfield, and you have a catchment area there, and you're dealing with fresh produce, there is always, if you take fresh produce and you move it within Trinidad, maybe you might get away with it. The moment you start packaging, get it onto an aircraft, you have to deal with delays. If the cold chain is not there, and if you don't follow the practices, you as a farmer, you as an exporter, you don't see the problem here. You see it on that end. So I'm thinking in terms of the cold chain that we look to ensure that the Piaco facility, which is an FDA-approved facility, that we utilize that for export, and the public-private partnership, depending on how that arrangement eventually works itself out, can get those facilities operational with an entrepreneurial model that allows other aspects of the agricultural sector, depending, as I said, on what comes out of it, to allow other aspects of the industry itself to go forward.
You seem to have a clear idea of what is needed. Who should you be articulating that to? Because I'm not seeing it reflective in terms of the budgetary allocations. And from what you're saying, it is absolutely critical, and I agree with you totally. What is the next step then? We're heading into 2017. I suspect when we come back here in 2018, and we're going to ask you the same question. What is the next step for Namdevco to push some changes, those same things that you've identified? What are you doing about it in terms of your conversation with the ministry, the line minister, the agencies that support you? What is your step to move forward in this area?
We are reached a stage where we are looking to get expression of interest. There has been some discussions with some of our local businesses who are currently involved in, who are import-based fresh produce businesses. They now would like to have greater strategic alliances between farmers and their operation, because they're realizing it's a difficulty in getting US dollars. And their operation, in order for them to expand the operation, they are looking at opportunities that may exist in utilizing these facilities. So that is one option in terms of getting them operational. The other option, again, as I said, it is open to discussion. It might very well be that someone comes up with a business plan that says, as would have been discussed in the past, that we want to commercialize cassava flour. Namdevco would have done some of the work in terms of, we have gotten to the state of getting to a cereal, a cassava-based cereal. That is, and I don't know if I can, it's a Cheerios, it's a loop-looking product built on cassava. There was some discussion with NFM to make a composite flour. So maybe there's an option there for some of those facilities to be given to some budding entrepreneur to be able to take that part of the industry, Namdevco work with the farmers, and build capacity amongst farmers to be able to supply these value-added products. And I say value-added in terms of the processing end of the chain. So there are options on the table, but at this stage we are working with the Ministry of Finance and looking at the expression of interest as to how we go forward with it. From where I sit, we do not have the kind of production for export. Maybe the packing house at this point is underutilized in terms of us being able to do the kind of exports that we want to, because we simply do not have the kind of production. We may have production. So you might be able to sell a product in the Macoya market or on the Davie market. Those may not meet the grades and standard and the food safety requirement for export.
I'm still on the whole concept of agriculture, and what are we doing to really encourage more participants? And when I say more participants, I'm referring here to the young people in our society. Because this morning we are speaking and we are hearing reports, and yet still production is low. We need to get foreign income. We need to get, in addition to foreign income, we're still looking at a high import bill with regards to agriculture products. And I want to direct this question to CGL. You have partnered with Atlantic LNG through the LEND program to provide technical support, training, and marketing assistance to young persons interested in entering the agricultural sector. So can you tell me the LEND program is advertised in rural communities? And if so, when did this program commence?
Chair, through you, the LEND program is an initiative of Atlantic LNG, and they heard about our successes, and we had a meeting. So it's a program that's been in existence, I think, a couple of years now. We've only entered into discussions with them over the past 3 months or so, and basically, what it's focused towards the southwestern peninsula of Trinidad, where that company, the Atlantic LNG, is trying to make an impact like what BP did in the southeastern end of Trinidad. We are working with them in developing various types of models that their farmers could implement and make a decent living out of it. And I want to correct a statement earlier. Caroni Green Limited does not produce only hot peppers. We produce tomato, pawpaw, pumpkin, plantain, dasheen, bush pimentos, pigeon peas, sweet potatoes. We've even done sweet corn as an import substitution. And I also want to correct the misconception that Caroni Green Limited does not only produce on its own. What we've done extensively over the last year in particular is to establish stakeholder relationship with farmer groups. So we have various farmer groups that we also have an alliance with PCS Nitrogen. So the way that works is that we have been able to develop our farms, our 2 farms, quite successfully. So we bring the farmer groups into looking at our farms and our agronomic practices and so on. And then PCS Nitrogen offers us their training facilities. So we do the classroom type training through PCS Nitrogen because it's in close proximity to one of our farms. And then we do the hands-on training at our farms to the farmers. So to date, we've gotten commitments in excess of 200 acres of production, of additional production in hot peppers. And what we are doing with LEND program, as well as we recently implemented a similar program with some Gasparillo farmers, is that we will have those farmers come to our farms, we'll teach them the practices that we're doing, they will observe, it's an interactive process. We will learn from them too, and then they go back out. What we are also working on with LEND is to obtain some lands through PSAEL, because PSAEL is the other state enterprise, Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited. And the intent is that PSAEL will make some lands available to the LEND program, and then we will work with the farmers and bring them on board to increase production. I think it's very important for us to understand in Trinidad, we are talking about agro-processing, but we do not have the production capability to support agro-processing. So it's like putting the cart before the horse. And I think a major thrust in the country has to be that we get our act together in terms of production, and production according to international standards and so on. So what we have done through the one initiative with pepper, which is our greatest success to date, is that we have, for the first time, our importers tell us, for the first time in 25 years, we are able to satisfy the requirements of the exporters. So there's consistent supply. What has happened is that Mr. Mohammed had mentioned before, you would have sporadic shipments by farmers. And if they get a higher price at Macoya market, they forget the export market. So that it was not done in a way as a sustainable industry. The fact that we have been able to maintain an export presence in the US, Canada, and the UK consistently over the past about 16 to 18 months shows that we have found a formula and a business plan that is workable. I'm not suggesting that it's perfect. It's still being fine-tuned, but at least it gives the industry that level of sustainability that's required if we have to move forward. And that is why we continue to do, with our very limited resources, these outreach programs like LEND, the Gasparillo farmers, the Waterfield farmers, the Superior farmers. We also dealt with the Tableland Pineapple Association and working with those farmers. And that interaction has worked very great for us, and we have seen production increase significantly, particularly in the area of hot peppers. What we do, we play the role and we try not to make money off of farmers. So we will bring them and expose them to what we have done successfully, and then we also establish linkages with the export markets so that you have the farmers getting the direct benefit of participating in these markets where there's a guaranteed kind of income. And what we've also seen is the spawning of a new cadre of entrepreneurs in Trinidad who will buy product from us and start processing as import substitution. If you look at the importation of pepper mash, which is the ground pepper, into Trinidad alone, which is done by companies like Vemco and so on, what is happening? We obtained some data on that importation, and the value of that business is of the order of $40 million TT annually. And I'm suggesting that there's no reason why we as a country should still be importing peppers into Trinidad. And what we are doing now is creating, because you have that sustainable level of production, now people can make investment. The private sector can make investment in processing side of it. And in the same way, we are trying to extend that kind of capability to the regular farmers. Because in Trinidad, my knowledge of the sector tells me that we talk a lot about commercial production. When we talk about a big farmer in Trinidad, somebody who's producing 2 acres or 5 acres consider themselves a big farmer. That is not commercial agriculture. And if we are targeting the export markets, you have to move in the hundreds of acres, the thousands of acres. And that is a whole different kettle of fish, which I don't think we have prepared ourselves adequately for. And I think the sector can make a significant contribution to the foreign exchange situation in the country, but the state needs to make that investment in order to get a return later down.
Are you satisfied, or do you have a mechanism by which you can gauge participation? For example, how many participants, how many new persons you have brought into this, this concept through the LEND program, and also through your collaboration with PCS with regard to your training programs?
Yes, I can quantify with respect to the farmers. We have had, through the various farmer groups that we've had some kind of collaboration with, they've brought approximately 200 acres of production into, they've put 200 acres of land into production. The land program is still at its developmental stage. So we have not implemented any projects to date. What the status we are with that program is that Atlantic LNG's team of land, they are now canvassing the farmers in the area, identifying what their interests are. And what we are doing at CGL, we are developing the business models for the various crops. So we have a business model that identifies, this is your production cost per acre, this is the income per acre, and this is the net profit you can derive from that. And we are doing that for several different crops, so that we are giving the farmers an opportunity to make a selection now. This is what you can gain, and you do it together. And then we are also advising them in terms of economies of scale. So if we want to do a particular crop, and we are saying it makes no sense you do less than 5 acres of that, then what LEND is doing, they are pooling those different resources and saying, X has 1 acre, X can do 2 acres, the other one can do 1 acre. And we are forming a cluster where those farmers can come together and produce.
So I have a short question for you. In your submission, you said that you will have forged a relationship with PCS Nitrogen Model Farm, right? Yes. To train persons interested in agricultural production, yes. Right? Do you all market this training mechanism? And if so, what is the procedure for accessing this training?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have not done any extensive marketing. We are working directly with various farmer groups and farmer cooperatives. Our major constraint is that we have very little resources. And obviously, I have to take my very limited resources to continue doing production while we're trying to share our knowledge. So that I don't have, for example, a facility like what exists at the ministry, where there are extension officers who I can send out to these groups. So I am limited because of the very tight resources that we have. But yet still, we are seeing significant gains, so that in the case of LEND, for example, Atlantic LNG is prepared to make some resources available to us where they can help to fill some of those gaps.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, but this is directed to Ministry. I want to find out from you, you spoke of an agriculture infrastructure program. I want to find out how long this program has been in existence. And again, is there a qualifying mechanism for this program? And could you provide information as to the number of access roads undertaken since this program started?
On an ongoing basis, a program of development of access routes. Also, under our water management program, we provide sluice gates as well as channel systems like culverts and so on. It is a PSIP project, and for this year we're going to do 8 access roads. We've already invited the tenders and so on, as well as sluice gates for Orange Grove and Plumita projects. Your question with regard to how you access?
I want to find out for you if there's a qualifying mechanism, because we have farmers throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and we heard about this agricultural infrastructure program. So I would like to know from you, what is the mechanism for farmers qualifying within a particular area?
Okay. For qualification, you have to send your request through the regional administration north, regional administration south, and that depends, of course, where you live, the one closest to where you live, and that will be reviewed, and you will be able to. They will guide you as to what it is you will be able to get out of it.
So should this application be made from farmers direct to the agricultural extension offices?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Last question. Now, there are many things that affect farmers. We speak of access roads, we speak of support, we speak about protection. I want to refer now to the whole issue of praedial larceny that affects farmers. And I want to ask your ministry if you have been reviewing legislation to provide stronger legislation in aiding farmers with regards to the whole question of praedial larceny, as well as your strengthening of your manpower with respect and your policing of farming areas to assist in the reduction of the offenses of praedial larceny.
Okay, we have a praedial larceny squad, as you may well know, and they have been policing the different areas. Of course, we need to get more staff on board with regard to that, but with the amount of staff that we have now on the praedial larceny squad, they police different areas, right? They cover a wide variety in Trinidad.
Could I interrupt? What is the strength of that staff?
We have 130 something, I believe it is.
Get the number?
130 something.
I'm aware too that, you have your praedial larcenies unit located, covering a broad area.
Yeah.
For example, the eastern area, you have that unit being covered from somewhere in the Curep area or something like that. Are you satisfied with the present arrangement? Because farmers are constantly complaining about praedial larceny. Are you satisfied with the particular area, that present arrangement? And are you looking into legislation for greater protection of farmers?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm satisfied with the amount of staff that we have, but what has been happening is that we work closely with the police, national security, policing. We also have our own estate constables as well attached to the ministry. So that despite the numbers of persons we have on the praedial larceny squad, we get the assistance from the police service, which beefs up the security thing. Now, with regard to the legislation, we are reviewing. The ministry has several parts of the ministry have enforcement persons. So you have fisheries monitoring, you have praedial larceny, forestry rangers, etc., etc. And the idea was to look at it holistically, so that we could have one unit which would satisfy all the different areas where praedial larceny could occur. That would require a collaboration with the Ministry of National Security, because the OLEP is the one that trains the people and so on.
No, my question to you really was if your ministry is engaging in any discussion with regard to looking at the whole praedial larceny arrangement, and if it is indeed impacting upon the safety of crops for farmers throughout Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, the praedial larceny report indicates that they have made some inroads into praedial larceny. They have all, however, indicated that they beefing up of the staff. So the praedial larceny squad has made some impact with regard to praedial larceny over the last 3 to 4 years.
On the area of praedial larceny, well, I didn't really want to start there, but since that's on the table, and why I'd ask you to repeat the figure as to the size of the squad, policing squad that you have, is to point you in possibly a new direction, in the sense that on the table right now, I think the authorities are recruiting of the order of 100 municipal police per municipality. Good? Compare that figure to the 130 in your entire squad. So we are talking that nationally you're looking at some 1,400 municipal police, most of whom would be in rural areas outside of Port of Spain, Arima, Point, and San Fernando. The other corporations are largely rural corporations. And therefore, the possibility of some amount of collaboration and redefinition of roles, because of what use is a rural municipal police if they aren't going to deal with the praedial larceny issue. So I'm suggesting that there's room for collaboration between the ministry and Namdevco, because you all would have a concern with praedial larceny, because there's nothing to pack if it's all stolen. And similarly for Caroni Green, that that kind of collaboration ought to be pursued, because you may not be able to get hundreds of police the way the municipalities are about to recruit, but certainly you could avail yourself of their services, because they would be working the same communities. So it's something I would want to throw out, along with the broader issue of collaboration, interagency, and intrastate collaboration, because mention has been made of EMBD, mention has been made of PSAEL. And between those two agencies and your good selves, the majority of arable land in Trinidad and Tobago resides. So the extent that we are talking about boosting agricultural production, are we in fact engaged in any discourse with EMBD, with PACL, and the question of the lands that they control being much more available to potential farmers?
Well, there is a discussion with the Commissioner of State Lands, with EMBD. As a matter of fact, the Commissioner has a working relationship with EMBD at this point in time, in that they are lending assistance with regard to the actual land security, land tenure issues. There's a collaboration among EMBD, the COSL, and the Commissioner.
Oh, thanks, Kristen. Chairman, I want to go back because on Namdevco's submission, quite clearly they said, and I quote, "Praedial larceny is a major problem currently faced by food producers in Trinidad and Tobago. It is demotivating to farmers, and greater praedial larceny laws and patrol needs to be implemented to alleviate such." Now, I listened to your response a while ago, and quite clearly there seemed to be a problem with collaboration or responses to questions, because I want to know, now again I will put to you, have you seen the need for improved praedial larceny laws and patrols as a ministry? Or I want to ask Namdevco, did you communicate to the ministry, and what was the ministry's response? Because clearly this was your submission, and I want to know if you communicated that to the ministry, and what was the ministry's response?
In terms of communicating the praedial larceny issue, we would have submitted, at the point of us submitting our documentation to the Parliament, we have submitted the responses to the ministry. But that time frame, in terms of that communication, would have happened in a very short space of time, maybe a few days apart. In terms of the praedial larceny as a problem, I think that is a problem that has been plaguing farmers for a much longer time than what would have. It just came out in documentation here, but it's a pretty old problem. That it needs addressing, that's a given, but it is not a problem that we would have just identified in the recent past. It's been there for quite some time. And maybe in terms of us dealing with praedial larceny, purely in terms of praedial larceny squads, there might be some new technological intervention that may allow us to manage praedial larceny in a much different way than using the squads, but in addition to other things, other kinds of support. Maybe, I'm just saying, maybe drone, maybe cameras on farms. There might be other initiatives. And in fact, there was a farm in Princestown at one time where that farmer would have used some initiatives to be able to manage praedial larceny without having a physical presence of patrol.
So are you saying that since you have been in your board, that this is the first time that you are looking at this problem officially between yourself and the ministry?
When the question was asked of us, this is the first time that I would have written a response to the Parliament about it. Would have made mention of praedial larceny in addition to the other problems. What would have happened before, I imagine that, yes, the issue of praedial larceny would have been addressed on several different occasions prior to my coming to Namdevco for the 7 months. I'm sure about that. Specifically, when and where, I would not be able to tell you, but it has been an ongoing problem.
May I, Chair?
So, Madam PS, could you respond again, bearing in mind this information I put in publicly to you?
Okay. Praedial larceny is a bugbear, and as Mr. Mohammed was saying, it's not a new thing. It has been going on for years. The praedial larceny squad was introduced 3 to 4 years ago to alleviate some of that burden with regard to the theft of products and so on. I recall in 2014 that the legislation was looked at and there were some increases in the fines associated with theft of products. Apart from that, in our incentive program, we have provision for security. I believe it is security system. It's 50% of the cost, up to a maximum of $30,000. So that's one of the ways we seek to assist the farmer in terms of security.
Can you enlighten us a little more on that arrangement?
All right. It is what it is. If you want a security system, right, or you purchase a security system, we would grant you 50% of the cost, up to $30,000, a maximum of $30,000. We have a whole list of incentives that the ministry offers, and this one relates to security. So that will also assist. So together with the collaboration between the police and the praedial larceny squad and the security system as an incentive.
I wanted to switch the focus a bit to the question of sustainability, particularly on the issue of the demographics of it all. What is the average farm like? Is it family farms, mega farms? You know, what is the dominant pattern?
The dominant pattern, it would appear, to be family farms, mostly.
And are you all satisfied that that arrangement appears to be sustainable? In other words, father to son, mother to daughter, that sort of thing, is continuing or is it dwindling?
From our records, I believe it's dwindling, because of the youth element, not wanting to continue in that particular career.
So what is the ministry's response? Because if we are talking about pushing production up so that these packing houses would have utility, that Caroni Green would make sense, then the initiative for that has to come out of our Ministry of Agriculture.
Yes.
So what's on the table to make farming a sustainable activity?
Actually, we have a whole list of incentives, so that if a young person
But
wants
clearly
to
it's not working, because you tell me the pattern is one of decline, then that list is of little consequence.
we have also training programs for the young people. Recently, last week, we were in a partnership with BPTT, right, where they had a workshop with about 60 participants to choose as a kind of pilot project. And this is really to assist young people in becoming entrepreneurs. So they are looking at that. And we're hoping out of that, it will encourage other people as well, other young people as well, to go into business.
Okay, let me put it this way. I think it was the CEO of Caroni Green who indicated a while ago that sustainable farm holdings can't be 2 to 5 acres, needs to be more. Am I correct, sir? All right. And therefore, in our message to potential young farmers, are we seeing that we are in a position to assure them acreages above that for production types that require acreages, substantial acreages? Is that what is being offered?
At this time, no. No.
But then it's just more of same, which is less.
I think the focus really is the technologies, right, and ICT in agriculture.
But even with technology, there still needs to be some land base, even if it's greenhouse. It's there still needs to be some assurance that some quantum of land, if not quantum of equipment, is going to be available for these new wave farmers.
You were focusing on more than 5 acres, you said.
Then we are about to set up borderline farmers who are inevitably doomed to fail if the acreages are going to be 5-acre plots. I don't think what the Caroni Green is saying is that that is the way to go, between the size of the acreage or the engineering technology involved.
But remember, we want to have as many people as possible. And it may not be possible, to give a wide variety of people large parcels of land.
The last time I flew over South Trinidad, to me, when you leave San Fernando, you're flying over Petro-Trin land, all the way to Point and all the way down to Cedros. All these farmers they do in the oil sector is in fact, matter of fact, that whole belt, if you draw a line from San Fernando to Rio Claro, anything south of that is Petro-Trin land. There are no other significant landholders in that belt.
But we have
so it's Crown lands, Petro-Trin lands, and as you drift further north into central, is former Caroni lands.
But what we
so we don't seem to have a problem in finding acreages of the magnitude that Caroni Green was suggesting are more feasible enterprises.
But how many people we would be able to give large portions of land?
Well, that
is the question.
And to me, the question answers itself. If Caroni Green is saying to us, 5 acres and under is a waste of time. Good? Clearly the young people realize that. So if you're offering 5 acres, I mean, you're about to waste a young man's time. You're about to send him on a course. That's really just wasting time.
But we have to consider as well that we would want to encourage mixed farming as well. And with regard to the amount of land that we give, that is a consideration as well.
But again, any map of South Trinidad shows you thousands of acres of land that's not in production, and that for whom PSCL and EMBD, in fact, the landowners, and therefore the rest is Crown lands. So the whole thing doesn't seem to make much sense in terms of the state as a quasi-state agency or the sub-territorial Crown lands.
We have to
the landholder and the people some who are brave enough to capture some of those lads, short-term entrepreneurs, but there doesn't seem to be a sustained approach on the part of the ministry to bring the idle hands and the idle lads together.
I wouldn't say that. And another thing we have to consider is the capability of the land. Is it fertile? You know, you have to do tests and so on. Some of those lands you would find that the fertility of the soil is not, you know, what we would want to work with.
I will leave that there for the time being, but I know people who have substantial planting holdings in the forest reserve area. I say no more on that for this time being. The other thing I wanted to draw attention to was whether our social values, our mores, and so on, are part of the problem keeping back agricultural expansion, in the sense that are we collaborating with the Ministry of Labor and cooperatives in terms of promoting cooperation or cooperative activity in the farming sector?
The farmers groups were introduced to the cooperative arrangement. This happened when we did this last year. It was last year. Yeah, and it's on an ongoing basis that that we encourage farmers groups to do that.
Is there programmed meetings between the cooperative division and your ministry and the other para-state agencies in terms of, you know, exploring the possibilities in that area? Are there scheduled meetings? You know, is there any ongoing conversation?
There are meetings in the districts. You have the farmers group meeting in the districts, and they meet with the cooperative representatives, members of the Ministry of Agriculture, other groups that they may want to invite, members, representatives of other groups they may want to invite. It generally it's supposed to be at least one meeting per quarter.
Okay. The other area I wanted to focus some attention on was the question of meat production. I couldn't help but notice over the Christmas period, huge billboards advertising imported pork at $9.99, while in the markets, Namdevco's markets I saw it, pork averaged 18 to 21. How is the ministry viewing that, and what plans are in place to deal with that? Because at the end of the day, that $9.99 pork is imported, and therefore foreign exchange is being depleted. So could you all respond between the between the ministry and the two agencies as to what you all have in place to treat with that?
Well, we recognize it as a trade issue, and the product is being allowed to come into the country. Now, we have legislation that could allow or not allow certain products to come in. What's that? So that what happens is that dependent on the product and where it's going to be imported from, we do a risk assessment to see whether it could land in this country. And because we're in a free trade market, once we have identified that there's no risk involved, it is allowed to come.
But do you think prohibition is the way to go?
We can't go with prohibition because we have a free market.
No, why I said prohibition, because we are that close to Venezuela, so anything you prohibit comes through CIDRAS.
And if you would have noticed in the past, we generally onto that. Because recently we had some coming to the carcass, I believe it was, and the praedial larceny squad was, it was reported, and we were able to intercept together with the police, and those animals were destroyed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions for Caroni Green. In your submission, Mr. Lala, you indicated that, and I could quote here, CGL is therefore proposing that there is a need for a state-supported execution agency with a mandate to coordinate all available resources for the commercialization of value-based agribusiness in Trinidad and Tobago. How does that mandate differ from Namdevco's role and function?
When we look at the local sector, I think there's a need for a redefinition of roles within the sector, and we need to be very precise about which agency is doing what, because there may be overlap on ineffective utilization of resources. But when you look at the sector as it is, what we have happening, and when you look at and you do a comparison with those countries where the agriculture sector is making a meaningful impact on GDP, what you find is that they always talk to the institutional framework to execute. I mean, with the greatest respect to not only Ministry of Agriculture, but most ministries are not geared up to implement some of those programs. And what you find in the more established countries is that they have these various institutional entities that will implement various aspects of it. I think that without a doubt, for example, if we look at what you are asking, today is the first day within my tenure as CEO of Caroni Green Limited that I'm sitting in the same room with Namdevco, myself, and the ministry. And in my opinion, that says a lot, because it means that the collaboration that's required to move the sector forward is not happening. And we need to recognize these issues so that in my conversation with the CEO of Namdevco this morning, we realized that there may be things that he's doing that I am also doing. And there has to be a mechanism whereby all of the resources are brought together. And when you look at the way the model works effectively in other countries, you have various stakeholders within the sector. You have, for example, agencies like UWI, UTT, CARDI, which embodies a tremendous amount of research information that's available. We have been talking to UWI, for example, and we have partnered with UWI Faculty of Agriculture. And what that has done for us is given us access to their alliance with the China Agricultural University. And what the dean of the faculty said to me, said that we have all this wealth of information, but we don't have the capability to get it down to the farmers. So there has to be that mechanism within the entire structure of the industry to translate that academic research into getting it workable for the farmers. And in a similar way, we have Namdevco, we have the ADB. We have, for example, suggested some proposals that could respond to the chairman's earlier question. What are we doing about getting young people into the sector? What part of our strategy at CGL is trying to find innovative ways of bringing your cost of production down on a consistent basis so that people can make a decent living. I must say that I'm heartened that we have seen in the recent past, at least 3 UWI graduates who have gotten into farming and have started utilizing some lands that their parents had that were not under production. And we try to reach out that information all over so that we could get as many people interested. And we have to understand again, I was CEO at Caroni 75 Limited, and I will tell you, out of the 5,000 cane farmers, the message that was being preached to their children was that we will do everything to ensure that you don't remain in this sector. And that is in reality what we are facing, and we have to find novel approaches to getting back that young blood into the sector. And that is why we have to look at all of the models and decide that we want to revamp them. Part of our plans, for example, that we are trying to develop is how do you make a farmer financially sustainable on his own. And the problem that exists in the current model is that we expect farmers to take all of the risk of praedial larceny, of floods, of all of the natural disasters, and he must bear all of that risk. And then there's tremendous potential, for example, in the value-added chain. But we are not involving the farmers in the value-added chain. And I'm saying that if we develop a business model that takes the farmer having a stake in the value-added processing, and this is where another agency like ADB can come in. ADB can now finance our farmers to get an equity investment into an agro-processing facility. So the farmer is now going to make some money in his actual production. He's going to make money in the value-added processing. And this is where the real money is in agriculture. I will tell you from some research that we have done. When we sell pepper as raw peppers on the export market, we sell it at $1 US per pound. But if we take that to the stage of mash, that goes to 12 US a pound. If we take it to the stage of dried peppers, it goes to 20 US a pound. And when you look at the industrial base that Trinidad has, there's absolutely no reason why we can't take the products up the value chain. And I think that has to be the model that we look at, where our farmers are not limited to only the high-risk area, but they participate in an equity manner at the value-added processing. So if there's a loss that's sustained for whatever natural disaster at the production side, then you have some kind of compensatory mechanism there. And when you do that, you will find that young people are saying, this thing is beginning to make a lot of sense now. And I think we have to really, I think, Chairman, through you, we have to make an appeal that we bring the resources together, and we have to brainstorm and try to find creative means of how do we move the sector forward with our very limited resources. The potential is there. What we are doing in the export market with respect to export of hot peppers is less than 5% of just the demand in Miami and New York. And we have inquiries now from all over. We have inquiries as far afield as Australia, where they're telling us, we will pay you 20 US a pound to send scorpion pepper to Australia. But I have to have the process to dry it. I have to have the resources to process it. What we have to do is to pattern what has been very, very successfully done in Jamaica. And the question about maintaining small farm holdings, the way the Jamaicans do it, the government of Jamaica has made substantial investments in what they call agro-parks. So they take these extensive thousands of acres and they develop the agro-parks throughout the country. They pay for the infrastructure, they pay for the putting in access roads. I sent a communication recently to the ministry showing where the government of Jamaica is paying for the irrigation systems for all the farmers. So when you put in all of this infrastructure and you have the government support for all of the other mechanisms, then you're going to get people attracted to agriculture. If you leave it as it is, because people complain now, the reality is, yes, we have a list of incentive programs at the ministry, but you ask the average farmer, are you accessing that and are you getting back your thing? And the answer is no, for whatever reason. And I'm saying, now is not the time to make excuses. Now is the time that we need to pool our resources to find the answers as to how we can do it. And there are so many examples right around us. Go to Jamaica, see what it is they have done and how effectively they have done it in getting their agriculture sector to contribute 7% of GDP. And there's nothing in their model that we can't implement locally. So that we have room in the model for this farmer who wants to do 5 acres. We have room in the model for somebody who wants to do 50 acres. And what we are doing is taking the available land resources and developing it in a way that we can have different scales of farming. For example, if you want to do a project that's ripe for Trinidad to do, it's to stop the importation of all those bell peppers that are selling at Price Mart and Massey stores and so on. But we need to do that, for example, under greenhouse conditions. That don't need 50 acres. I've been talking, the ministry had put on an investor from Netherlands to me, and he's very, very keen in coming and setting it up. But we have to find ways of breaking down the bureaucracy to make that investor, make the whole situation very investor friendly. So you want to come invest, this is what we can do to facilitate you and get you up and running as quickly as possible. As a country, we can't move forward if we are not prepared to make that investment in the development of agriculture.
But I want to point something out. This is why I keep harping on the infrastructure that's there. And we're just not seeing it. In the Caroni lands, former Caroni lands, there are the old Tasca road systems, much of which has since been developed into secondary roads. In the oil belt, there are the oil field roads, thousands and thousands of miles of roadway. At one stage, it was equivalent to what exists in the municipal system. But all these oil field roads are there. And so therefore the question of agricultural access doesn't exist if we were to turn around our perspective on those leasehold lands that is the property of Petrotrin and under the control of PSAEL. There are miles and miles of access roads that were leading to oil wells and to gas wells and so on, and to water wells even, that are there, that exist, and that in most cases are served with electricity because the wells utilize electricity in order to pump. So substantial infrastructure exists, so we don't even necessarily have to create agro-parks. We, in effect, have an infrastructure that can be easily converted, and there are lots of freelance farmers who have captured, including oil workers, those lands. So that's why I'm trying to direct the ministry's attention that we really need to have a strategic plan that takes into account what exists. And there are thousands of miles of roads that exist that are the property of the oil company.
Sorry.
Just let me finish. I just want to finish out the question that I had.
Chair,
You want to respond to Chairman? Go ahead.
I just wanted to add something to the mix. With regard to agro-processing, we also have some incentives with regard to that. And it's the establishment of facilities. We have a 50% to a maximum of 50,000. Refurbishing of facilities, 50%, a maximum of 20,000. And the packaging material, 50%, a maximum of 15,000 for agro-processing.
Just to follow up with Mr. Sharma there again, I am both happy and a bit sad based on one of the comments that you made, that I'm happy that the JSC was able to bring you here today, that you could have met Namdevco to have a simple conversation. But it's telling in terms of the relationship of the various state agencies that falls under the Ministry of Agriculture, that more conversation, if not prior to the challenges we're having now with the fall in the oil revenue, but clearly from the opening comment that I made in terms of who is driving policy, is policy communicated from the Ministry of Agriculture down to its state agencies, its partner agencies. But if that is on the surface, that conversations are not happening, because I like what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Sharma, as a proponent of technology. Technology solves a lot of the problems, a lot of the challenges in terms of land, in terms of vertical farming, in terms of soilless farming, in terms of you know, a lot of the modern day processing and agricultural processing that you see happen in some of the developing countries. My challenge is why, and probably anybody could answer, why is there, to me from what I'm hearing, a lack of coordination in terms of the various, even the three bodies sitting here today, in terms of the language, in terms of the policy directions, in terms of the strategies. Why up to today, there still seems not to be a cohesive one-direction policy for these agencies? And knowing that, I would say this falls in the lap of the ministry being the policy director here to lead Trinidad and Tobago in terms of its agricultural sector. Why is that not happening?
Chairman, members, Namdevco as a board are very clear who drives the policy of agriculture. And that would be the office presently located in St. Clair, called the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries. Minister, very early, through the leader of that particular ministry, the line minister, would have given the board, which came into being, the current board, I think it's the 13th board, in December of 2015, a very clear mandate of what our priorities should be. So we have not run off as a board and tried to do our own thing. I would want to share with you what are the buckets, the 3 or 4 of the buckets of that mandate. And the biggest bucket is the farm to table program. So if I could just stress before I go on with the buckets, that we do not speak to the wider issues of that are in agriculture, which are plenty and have been around for many, many years. That we can give inputs as a board to the line minister or through representatives of the ministry. That happens from time to time. Does it happen often enough? Probably not. But to say that there is no interface would not be correct. Back to our mandate. Our main reason why we come together as a board and meet once a month is to drive the farm to table methodology. And put very simply, it's about getting a better value for our farmers for what they put into their work as farmers. There are other people in the chain who may be benefiting, or let me put it this way, the farmer maybe we believe is benefiting disproportionately to his or her effort. So that the farm to table is our main priority as a board. That, as CEO, acting CEO mentioned earlier, has several legs to it. One of them is the farmers' markets, which brings the farmer in direct contact with the consumer. And we have those all across the country, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday every week. And there, when you go there, not just, I would say it's fair to say across the country, the age demographic of the farmer definitely is not a 40, but you do see some glimmers of hope in terms of young farmers that most times are third and fourth generation farmers. But you're also having new farmers without any history or legacy coming into farming, because young people, if they see opportunity, they pursue it. And there's no doubt that if we could improve things in terms of how we provide the facilities and the infrastructure for farming, that it would become more attractive. The other legs of farm to table, mentioned it very quickly, value added, as well as, and that would be facilitated through the packing houses. We met recently with the Ministry of Planning, and they have a clear protocol on how they want to pursue that, so that we have a sustainable solution, and not something that you know we can't see going on for some time and reaping benefits. Export is also a leg of that, as well as sales to and through institutional markets. So farm to table is, as I said, just to stress, is the clear directive from the Ministry of Agriculture through the line minister. The other priorities that have been given to us in terms of a mandate, and it was very clear, is improving the physical facilities at Macoya and Dibe in particular, as well as in Orange Valley. So that, in terms of a project, turns into, in both the case of Macoya and Dibe, extending parking facilities, which will make it far more comfortable and less disruptive of those persons who are using roads and highways close to the markets. Currently, it's no secret that that has been an issue, particularly in Macoya. Thirdly, in terms of identifying priorities, the ministry has clearly indicated that food safety is a priority, and that receives the attention of the board in terms of directing resources of field officers and having meetings and getting advice from international bodies in that area. So those would be a few of the expressions of the mandate that we have received from our minister. We are very clear that farm to table is our #1 reason for being, and are we moving fast enough to make improvements for our farmers? No. But are we focused on them and making some progress? We believe yes, and we just have to continue in that direction.
Are you satisfied with the current resources that is allocated to Namdevco in terms of accomplishing that objective of the farm to table program at this time?
Well, I would say that the Namdevco has a budget, and we have to make the best use of that budget. I come from private enterprise. I don't have an agriculture bone in my body before that, but I have a marketing bone, and Namdevco is about marketing. This is about enabling agriculture opportunity for farmers. Part of our responsibility as a board and as a management of Namdevco is to take the resources we have and make the best use of them. And from where I stand as the chair, and certainly I believe I reflect the view of the board, we have to become more customer-focused as an organization, as Namdevco. And that shows itself in doing a lot more listening and doing a lot more responding to what farmers want, but also our customers who come to our markets. So in terms of resources, you could always have more resources. We know the reality of the country, and I would prefer to leave resource allocation discussions to the Ministry of Agriculture, and we will lobby for what we want, but whatever we get, we have to make best use of it.
Mr. Chair, just have just one question again that I want to just pose to the ministry and perhaps Caroni Green. And it is along the line of genetically modified seeds. What is the ministry's position in terms of the use of and the keeping of those genetically modified seeds? Have they been in use in the past? Is there any plan to use them? And for Caroni Green, is that something that has been part of your pursuit in terms of our policy in looking at these as part of the improvement in the sector in terms of higher productivity, higher yields, and so on? So perhaps the ministry could.
Okay, I'll ask the acting CTU to answer that.
Okay, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon now. With respect to GMO seeds, we have to look at the ministry. We produce seeds for farmers, but we produce specific crop seeds, locally adapted seeds. Now, when you look at GMOs, most likely, I mean, we don't do that type of work here. It's really hybrid seeds, and they are brought into the country through, I'm sure, huge companies, seed companies that make them in the more developed parts of the world. And therefore, those seeds are mainly vegetable types, which corn, of course, would be one that is highly, one of those crops that lend to that type of activity. But so yes, there may be, I think there's a stipulation that those types be adequately labeled as such, but with respect to the ministry limiting the importation of those seeds, no, and we do have seeds for farmers, but based totally on locally adapted types. Thanks.
I want to kind of summarize on what happened this morning to lay my question. Quite early this morning, the PS mentioned the objective of the ministry is to enhance employment and income opportunity, policy direction, regulatory framework in providing opportunities for persons. I was just moved by the chairman's contribution when he spoke about marketing. And my concern really is that we have a situation with low production, high import bill, and there is a need to engage and encourage new farmers, young farmers, new farmers, whether they be young or old. And I am just asking the Namdevco, what is their focus with respect to engaging these new farmers in terms of marketing? And I know I've heard a lot of ideas, innovative ideas, especially coming from Caroni Green. Is it Caroni Green? Yeah, and I want to ask Caroni Green also, how long have you been in existence? And I want to point to the last question I asked when I asked you if there was a mechanism in place where you could gauge your success rate with regards to what you have been doing. And also I ask you, what was your impact in rural communities? Because I am from a rural community, and I've never heard of some of the things that I now know of with regard to your presentation. So I want to ask two questions here. I want to ask the Caroni Green, what has been happening? Because how long have you been around? And why haven't there been a greater impact So what were the encumbrances, that you encountered that we did not see that presence manifested in more farmers and the interest in farmers and the interest in young people seeing farming as a way out, as a way to make a livelihood? So all in all, I'm asking Namdevco in their marketing engagements if there is anything there to engage young people and other people who may be interested in farming to come on board. What kind of engagement policy, marketing policy, because we have heard a lot about from farm to table. Quite clearly that has been successful. All I want to know is what you are doing also to encourage other people who we now know not as farmers, but as persons farming. Because we know too that there is something called a farmer, and there is something called persons who engage in farming. How do we move people from just engaging in farming to embrace farming as a profession, as a way of life, and to make a livelihood for their farmers and to improve on our food import bill, to lessen that food import bill, and also to attract more foreign exchange into the country?
Go ahead.
Hi, if I may. I am part of a committee on farm to table for Namdevco. And it's very interesting that you raise that point because it is an important factor for the country to encourage additional production through our youth. Whilst we understand it was made clear to us that Namdevco's drive is more on marketing and development and less on origination, we do see its value, its merit, and part of our farm to table initiative that we're working on is we have engaged discussions with 4-H, which focuses on the youth in schools, and we've had a number of meetings with them actually, and started fleshing out a plan where we could engage the students who are of a reasonable age to understand, have farmers go to schools, have interactions with the children, have a plan for how they will grow certain crops, educate them about certain crops, educate them about the process and the marketing process also. Ideally with the focus of having them engage in farmers markets. So we have existing farmers markets where we bring existing farmers to the market, but what we wanted to get at is that especially in rural areas, because this is where we're focusing with the youths, in rural areas where everyone has a kitchen garden, we want to also bring the children in the schools from an educational perspective, educate them about growing crops and having it as an entrepreneurial activity, and get them linked with farmers, get them exposed to technology, and bring the youth's produce to a farmer's market and encourage development in rural areas in that manner. That's Namdevco's initiative in trying to get the youth involved.
If you want.
Yeah. I would just like to make a small contribution. In terms of the obstacles facing young people and farmers in generally, one of the major obstacles is land tenure.
Yeah,
and for those of you who have been following the current Minister of Agriculture over the last year and a half, at almost every opportunity he got, he mentioned land tenure and land ownership as the biggest obstacle facing farmers farming in Trinidad and Tobago. Only recently, he distributed something like about 100 leases to farmers who have, some of whom have been waiting for decades, 30 years. That's one of the major obstacles. Secondly, credit facilities. A lot of the perception is that farming does not require any capital, any training, and it couldn't be more wrong. The access to credit facilities and capital for young farmers, the bars are too high, and that's a major distraction. And until we fix that, the encouraging young people to come into farming will remain difficult. We have to fix that. There are several other issues. The third one, in my view, is farmers' welfare. It is critical that a division in the Ministry of Agriculture be dedicated to farmers' welfare. You cannot be giving farmers or expecting farmers to live below a living wage. So you need to have a division specifically designed to look after farmers' welfare. And I think those three major areas, if we pay some attention to them, will go a long way in increasing our agricultural GDP.
I just want to make a comment based on all of the comments made thus far from the three individuals. I hear what you're saying with land tenure and also in regards to some of the obstacles by way of credit facilities for entry of new farmers into farming. I just want to ask a question because I like what was said in regards to working with 4-H and getting young people entrepreneurially minded in regards to farming. I'm wondering if one of the problems that we're having in regards to attracting individuals, especially young people, into farming is the approach that we are taking in regards to how we present farming. I'll give you an example. How many farmers in this country have registered companies? Are they just registered farmers? Or is they going to register the company and therefore use a business model by way of hiring individuals to expand that company? That will take care of the credit facility obstacle that you just indicated. In regards to land tenure, if you are entrepreneurially minded, there are always going to be obstacles, no matter what business. It could be IT, it could be computers, or it could be farming. There will always be obstacles. And once you have an entrepreneurial mind, you're going to look to overcome those obstacles. For example, a lot of the major countries in the world are moving away from this idea of needing 100, 500, 1,000 acres of land, and they're moving into 3D farming, whereby they would use 1,000 square feet and go up. So you would have different levels of crops being grown, and they're controlling everything in those rooms in order to increase production. That's just one example of an entrepreneurial mind overcoming an obstacle such as land tenure. So what I want to say is if you're trying to attract young people right now are thinking about money. How can they make money? How can they survive? You mentioned a career in agriculture. Why is it that a farmer cannot register a business and have that business as his career? So for Namdevco specifically, if you are presenting farming in that manner, and just giving another example, how many feasibility studies have been done on a particular crop so that if I, as a young person, want to get into farming, let's use an example, tomato, you can give me a feasibility study as to how much money I can make in Trinidad and Tobago growing tomato. And you're selling it as a business whereby you can make money through a feasibility study, because that's what the young people want to find out. How much money am I going to make doing this? And if it is presented in that manner, by way of feasibility studies for every single crop that you can get your hands on in Trinidad and Tobago, you may find that regardless of the obstacles, they decide that they want to get into this. Just throwing out those ideas.
I think we need to wrap up at this point. So I want to thank Permanent Secretary and her staff. I want to thank Chairman of Namdevco and his staff. I want to thank Caroni Green, for the response to our questions. And if further to this day there are any additional submissions you think you would like to share with us, please feel free so to do. Because I think we all agree we are doing this not for ourselves and our particular careers, but for the benefit of the wider country. So again, I want to thank you all for sharing with us this morning, and hope that we ourselves in our report will be able to capture what you have presented to us and bring some further relief to the farmers and the national community as a result of our deliberations this morning. So again, thank you all so much for your contributions here, and this meeting now stands adjourned. Thank you.